Man, you hear it all the time, like, ooh, that trigger is crisp, or damn, that's a nice break. And that reset, on point. But the only trigger I know is the one that came on my AR, and I've never been told to pay attention to its take up, the creep, the pull weight, the break, crispiness, or the reset length. Then I have no idea what the hell folks are talking about. So let's fix that today. We're talking how to grade your trigger and what to look for in a better one. Helping you grade your triggers today. Why? Because your current trigger is probably holding you back, and the trigger is that one swap which can immediately change the way you shoot for the good. The goal of finding the right trigger, though, is that balance, finding that balance between anticipation and reliability. The less the anticipation of the break, the better, but probably not so light that looking at it wrong, it causes it to fire. The problem is knowing what to look for in a so-called upgrade, because it should not come down to price, brand, or popularity. Your trigger squeeze, it's personal, and so should your choice of trigger. So doesn't matter if you're looking at the single stages, the two stages, the drop-ins. Here's what to pay attention to before, I'll say it, before pulling the trigger on your next trigger. All right, so most of the terms will apply to both your single stage and your two-stage trigger. I'll call out any differences along the way, but as far as how each one functions and all the parts and pieces, I actually covered that close up and in depth in our triggers episode. It's a really good one, worth the watch and refresher. I'll leave that one down below. Okay, so the first trigger function that we're focusing on is trigger take-up, travel, creep. Basically, that's any and all trigger movement just before hitting the wall. Stage triggers, they are basically already up against that wall. That's where the seer is just about to jump and break the hammer free. Because of that, any movement or travel of a single stage prior to the hammer breaking free is called trigger creep. MilSpec triggers, lower tier triggers, they're notorious for having excessive creep, but that's what we're looking for here. How far is the creep? Is it a millimeter or more? How does that creep feel? Is it smooth? Is it sticky? Is it gritty? And why does that matter? Not only can a little bit of creep lead to potentially anticipating your shot, but if it's gritty or sticky along the way, it actually might throw off your attempt at a smooth and even pull. As for two stages, of course, there's intentionally a small bit of travel before the wall. That is called the first stage, also called the take-up. Actually, there's quite a few two-stage trigger options. They have various take-up travel distances, plus or minus maybe a few millimeters. But the most important factor here is going to be the pull weight of that first stage or the take-up. We'll hit on that next, but what do you gain from a smooth take-up to the wall, and are all two stages equal? First of all, no, they're definitely not equal in the quality of finishes, tolerances. You got spring choices and whatnot. So when feeling that take-up of a two-stage, also feel for grittiness, choppiness of the pull. All right, so as for what you gain from a light and smooth take-up of that first stage, first is being able to predict your shot, but still not anticipate it. For most, it's being able to deliberately take an extra pause, line up sights, maybe take a breath before squeezing your trigger. The second benefit to smooth take-up, just like the single stage, if the parts of your trigger squeeze are gritty or they're jumpy, it can lead you to throwing a shot here or there. Let's talk about trigger pull weight. There is a wide range on the pendulum of pull weights. On one end, you have your hair triggers, around 1.5-ish pounds. On the other end, upwards of almost 9-ish pounds. There's two things to keep in mind about those extreme ends of pull weight, though. One, the heavier the pull, the more resistance. Again, potentially leading to some pulled shots or less of a clean squeeze. Two, an extremely light pull weight means that there's a higher chance that it can go off when you don't want it to. Most folks are probably looking at changing out a MilSpec trigger for the first time, in which case most lean towards shedding a pound or two from the MilSpec pull weight of 6 or 8 pounds, especially when sticking to that single stage. The important part here is to make the trigger as easy for you to pull as possible. And if you have to think about it, to make your shots accurate, then lighter is probably a better choice. Likely why most single stage shooters, they still land somewhere around a 3 to 4 pound trigger pull weight. Your two-stage pull weights, they're a bit of a different beast because 9 times out of 10, you'll have the overall pull weight divided between both stages, where the first stage, it's going to be heavier than the second. For example, common two-stage 4-pound pull weight. It might have a 2.5 first stage, followed by a 1.5 pound second stage. The point being is reducing the anticipation of your AR firing, and that's probably the reason why, that is the reason why there is a lighter second stage. All right, now we're onto the trigger brake. It's the part that goes boom when your sear disengages from the hammer. There's 2 attributes to your trigger brake, and remember this: crisp and clean or soft and dull. Here's the easiest way to think about it. It's like the difference between snapping a glass rod or icicle versus snapping a carrot in half. The icicle is going to be very crisp. It's going to be snappy. The carrot, though, it'll be more pliable and it'll softly bend just before it finally snaps clean. The softer the brake, the more resistance you're going to feel before it finally gives. It's the similar issue that we had with heavier pull weights. Extra resistance can put you at risk of pulling the trigger or giving you too much time to pre-anticipate the shot and cause you to jerk. On the other hand, that crispy trigger brake, it's a lot harder to anticipate. You're not quite sure when it's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden there it is. Single stage, 2-stage, it really doesn't matter. Almost always, the cleaner the brake, the better. Sometimes that does come with a higher cost because you're paying for R&D into tolerances, geometry, finishes, coatings that make triggers crisp as ice. There's another part of your trigger brake to pay attention to. It's called over travel. This is basically any additional rearward movement of your trigger immediately after the hammer breaks. Standard single-stage MilSpec triggers, they're often the biggest offenders of excessive over travel. 2-stage triggers, they can have a little bit of travel as well, but there is a test you can do for this. So what I'm going to do is ride the hammer just slightly off the sear and then wiggle my trigger, because that tiny little bit of space and travel when you wiggle the trigger, that's how much over travel you have. Again, there is a little bit of over travel with some of your 2-stage triggers as well, but that's probably more intentional due to the travel distance of your disconnector spring. All right, so is over travel a bad thing? Not necessarily, until your goal becomes more consistency, accuracy at a faster fire rate. Then reducing the amount of that over travel can potentially also reduce your trigger reset time. It shortens the distance that you have from bang to reset to bang again. Top priority though should go to the crispiness of your brake and then reducing that shot anticipation. All right, speaking of trigger reset, we're talking about that one next. That last function of your fire control group where the hammer releases from the disconnector and the sear catches the hammer again. We're back to square one and we're ready to fire after that. Crappy trigger resets, they can have long travel distance until it resets. Can be choppy, can be gritty, it can be a bit sluggish feeling, meaning there's resistance during the travel as you release the trigger and it really doesn't snap back into place. Better trigger resets, they're shorter, they're smoother, and snappy. You can actually hear like a higher pitched snap rather than a thud or a thunk. All right, clean, snappy resets. Why are they important? 2 things. One, it's often that tactile feeling of the trigger resetting that prompts me to follow up with my next shot. 2, just like I mentioned before about brake and over travel, the shorter the distance between bang, reset, and bang again, the more incremental speed that I can gain. Even more so after muscle memory takes over and I learn where my trigger reset and fire is, shot after shot after shot. Hey, I mentioned this earlier in the beginning, finding the right trigger, it's a balance between the anticipation and reliability. When you decrease the anticipation of your shot through those cleaner, crisper trigger pulls and brakes, and you increase reliability with quality triggers that function the exact same way every single squeeze, you actually might just start seeing a lot more deliberate bullseyes on the range. Oh, like I promised, here's that 17-minute AR15 trigger breakdown episode that we did. Wait till you see the close-ups of these guys functioning. It's pretty cool. We'll see you over there.